Welcome back to the ... podcast. This is the first ever blind date podcast to take place here on the ... podcast. I'm sure somebody's done it before, but I'm going to go ahead and steal the title Blind Date Podcast. I put out some feelers just looking for some people that wanted to sit down and do a podcast together, and Josh was one of the first people to raise his hand, and we got him in here, and literally as he walked in the door of my house was the first time that I ever met this kid. I say kid because it turns out he's 10 years younger than me, and when you get as old as I am, everybody is pretty much a kid that's underneath you. But really neat guy. He is a physics major back in North Carolina. He's a reservist in the Air Force, and he's deployed here for a couple months. And but yeah, he's majoring in physics. He's got an interesting understanding and belief of Taoism and Buddhism, and we just got to kind of sit there and riff about what he thinks and kind of get a feel from him. Super chill dude. You can just tell he's totally dialed into with the conversation that he had with me. Just kind of seems like one of those people that if he's talking to you, and you have his undivided attention, which I absolutely loved for the sake of doing this podcast. It was a pleasure to meet him, and I'm sure I'll keep in touch with him in the future. So without further ado, Josh. All right, so this is the first episode of the Blind Date series, and we have Josh. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Do you come here often?
I do. I happen to live here.
Oh, yeah?
A little longer than you do. I'm here for a year, and you just told me you're here for 2 months, correct?
Yep. I feel like it's one of those things that if I was here for an entire year, I would want to be gone in 2 months, but because I'm here for 2 months, I want it to be maybe like 6 months, maybe not a whole year.
Right. You wish you could extend, probably for the extra pay and all that good stuff, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So what we do on this show, or I always use the, like a multi-person concept. I say we, when in all reality, it's just me. But usually what happens here is we have some icebreaker questions. And I think there's nothing better for our little blind date than to come up with some icebreaker questions for you. So the first one I'm going to ask you is your favorite place that you've ever been.
That is a really good question. And I'm put on the spot too. This is tricky.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
So I would say the first thing that jumped into my head was one time when I was at ECU, East Carolina University, and I was, partying like people do when in Rome. And I remember walking around the next morning after a party, and I found this like memorial garden for a girl that had passed away there.
Interesting.
And I remember sitting there with my buddy, who is a very interesting character. I feel like he's given me like 18% of my worldview. And I remember we just sat there and we did some meditation, and it was just the most beautiful location. And you could tell that even though there's like, tragedy behind it, it seemed like one of the most comfortable places, especially in an environment where everybody's like drinking a lot. So
that is probably one of the more insightful places that anybody's said yet. I typically, I had previously lived in Japan, so a lot of my friends that I've talked to that have lived in that part of the world, they'll say like Thailand or something great, and they kind of keep it very broad. But it sounds like you're very introspective in the sense that you identified with a specific like time and place more than anything.
Yeah, and it's funny too because that was just the first one that popped into my mind. And as I was saying it, I was like, it was very similar to my grandmother's backyard. Actually, it's my granny's backyard. I don't know why I call her my grandmother. Never called her that in my life. But it's like, it's a very similar thing. I can show you some pictures, but I guess for the listeners, it would be not very straight lined. It's a very like organic feel. There's a bunch of like, rocks and pathways and all kinds of different flowers all over the place, very colorful, and things hanging down and wind chimes. And so I feel like that's just a really interesting environment. And specifically, I liked how it was juxtaposed to the entire culture, like the party culture, because it was a spot where you could just sit down.
I think you nailed it in the sense that, like, instead of answering the question like I kind of envisioned you might, like your favorite place, you answered your favorite environment. Safe to say?
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that. Next question, actually. Do you believe in aliens and their existence? Yes or no?
Okay. This is a topic I can get on board with because I've spent a considerable amount of time thinking about it.
Perfect.
Or maybe not even thinking about it, but just digesting other people's ideas on the matter.
Right.
So, and I think I'm going to bring it full circle, but I feel like in a lot of cases, I'm an aperture in the sense that I can look at a topic and I can try to take into consideration a variety of views on the matter. And it's not even like I'm coming up with my own idea. It's just that I've, shoved in so many other concepts to the point where it's everybody else's ideas kind of speaking through me.
So do you mean that in the concept that you're accepting of what other people believe, and you can either accept that it's their truth or you find some truth in it?
It's really tricky. Like, I can convince myself that there's a unidentified flying object, a UFO, and I can tell myself, well, that came from another star system for sure. But really, I would just be showing my own inability to distinguish, something that was flying around in airspace.
Okay.
Or, a lot of the reportings of UFOs, they tend to be people misjudging some kind of star or weather
Right.
pattern. So it's probably better to say that the Fermi Paradox, you familiar with that?
I am not.
So the Fermi Paradox is based on this guy, Enrique Fermi, who's a physicist. He was chilling with a bunch of other mathematicians and physicists, and I believe this was at Los Alamos when they were developing the atomic bomb for the Manhattan Project.
Okay.
But at one point, he kind of just slammed his hands down on the table at lunch, and everybody looked at him, and he was like, "Where are they? Where are the aliens? They should be here by now." It doesn't make sense that we would have, we're one planet of 8 around one star. There's hundreds of billions of other stars in our galaxy. There's hundreds of billions of other galaxies in our universe.
Right.
It would make sense that complex chemistry would have created biology, intelligence, and, they would have created the enterprises to be able to get or at least broadcast their presence to the point where we'd be able to pick it up by now.
Right.
And so, they're sitting at a table with a bunch of other really intelligent, analytical people, and then they all start weighing in saying, well, they could have damned themselves before they got to that point, and then they all start saying, what are the different things that could bring a civilization down? And, superbug, solar flare.
Right.
Misusing energy resources.
Even more highly advanced technology.
Yeah, genocide, atomic bombs, something even bigger than that. And so when it comes to aliens, the fact that we're here, we're the aliens, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
And for us to confidently say that there's no possibility of them, then I'd say that you're kind of counting your chickens before they hatch, or you don't have all the evidence in, so it's kind of silly to assume that there isn't. But then I look at the other side of the spectrum where it's the people that are like, they definitely exist and they're here and they're getting covered up.
Yeah.
Because there's no evidence for that either. So it seems a little silly to make that claim. But I know the fact that we are here right now. I mean, it happened. And I don't doubt that it's happened in other circumstances, but I just don't know, how the circumstances happened specifically. But I do, this kind of led me down a rabbit hole of trying to start getting familiar with civilization enders. And there's really not much an individual can do to avoid that.
Right.
But I've got a pretty wicked bug out bag, and I can get clean water from my environment, and I've practiced it. And my dad's taught me how to hunt pretty well.
Yeah.
And so, I'm pretty comfortable being cold or too hot. And I can layer up or take clothes off. And, I really took notes when I did the SEER class and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
And it's it's fun to do. That's what the most important part is. The spirit in which I do it in is not oh God, we're all doomed, so I got to practice. It's more this is fun because Amazon, you can so conveniently acquire the materials that you need for camping very cheaply. And as soon as that goes away, it's like, oh, shoot, I should have gotten like a $20 water filter that's literally you could just keep reusing until it clogs up, turn it around, clean it out, and use it again. If only they had that a long time ago. So
right. I can't help but say that I think I agree with you completely. I don't know. I don't believe in like the little green man with the gigantic head and the big eyes and all that kind of stuff. Because I think that that's like a creation that somebody thought up and a bunch of people gravitated to and attached to it. But I'm not so naive as to believe that there's not something else out there. The likelihood of that amount of space, which oddly enough we'll get into here in a minute, because I kind of have it as a note of something to go a little deeper with you on. So maybe we'll touch on that in a second. And
also time, if I might add.
Oh,
because,
really?
I mean, it is an incredibly expansive universe, but at the same time, 13.8 billion years is what they're estimating. But also, like, the sense of time that we have, it might be, like, misinterpreted. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But, they say if you're, like, next to a supermassive black hole, like on a planet that's, like, stable enough to be able to sustain life, that you would be perceiving time much slower than another, like our planet for instance. And if that's the case, like maybe 13.8 billion years ago, when all the material was kind of like closer to each other, maybe time was a totally different scale.
Right.
So,
I mean, we obviously created time. I mean, what does the term 100 years even mean?
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things.
That's Neil deGrasse Tyson. You ever listen to Star Talk?
Yeah.
So I love how he can break stuff down like that, because he just kind of comes in and says, time is something that you recognize a repeatable thing, and then you just go through it and I'm listening to this beautiful music in the background. Can you hear it?
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know that the mics are picking it up, but yeah, dude, it's deafening here.
All right. Well, for the listeners, we're listening to a Muslim prayer that gets played 5 times a day?
5 or 6, and it's hard to say actually. I think there is a defined number of times per day that Muslims are called to prayer, but you got to consider the fact that if you walk out my front door, you can see the peak of at least 3 mosques. So there's no saying that those happen we're speaking of time. There's no saying that that those happen to fall at the exact same moment in time. Like when I first got here, I remember they would go off at 6 a.m. and now they're going off at 4:30 a.m.
Oh boy.
And then again at 6. So I think everybody I think it's kind of like churches back in America. They just have their time of day that their service starts, so to speak. So
yeah,
you can hear it echoing like crazy all over the place here.
Yeah, I went to Charleston, South Carolina the other day, and I was on the rooftop bar, and just looking around, I could see 20 or 30 steeples
of
churches. Yeah. So it's just interesting to be in a totally different location, and it's just ideologies that people adopt in different geographical locations. But then, from the point of view of my father, he'd be like, "Oh my gosh," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's the same thing, kind of."
Right. Exactly. No, anybody that hasn't been outside of the States, my family's a lot like that too. They haven't seen some of the parts of the world that I've seen, and I told I think I told my sister about it or somebody, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that would scare the hell out of me." And it's like, why? Because somebody's going to, worship their God. They're not like going there to put on a vest and hit a button and make everybody blow up. That's a stereotype. When in all reality, the stereotype should be you hear that music and people are going to prayer.
Yeah, it's just tricky because humans, we're just animals with the pretty developed prefrontal cortex that recognizes threats.
Yep.
And so when media recognizes just a perfect business plan of feeding into those fears, it's it's just job security, and there's a lot more tied into that as well. But it's so easy to fall into that fear mindset.
Right.
But it's way funner. I'd recommend people to, if you see somebody that looks different than you, and for like a split second you might think that they're a threat because we have eyes and our senses to be able to perceive mates and threats and all kinds of other things. But if you can recognize that fundamentally you share like a huge percentage of your DNA, it's like 99.9% or whatever, pretty close. And, if I was going to try to swing this back towards aliens,
if
please
you will,
but it would be that if we are all basically the same, but we're all interacting with others that are similar to us, but through interacting, we get to see our own character and our own nature. I don't doubt that similar circumstances have happened all throughout the universe in different time, places. And so really what you should ask yourself is, who do you want to be right now?
Right. Yeah.
So
I mean, there's that like really stripped down, dumbed down, saying, is this really where you want to be when Jesus comes back?
Absolutely.
But I think
same thing.
There's a lot of truth in that, what is your value system and who are you? So, next that's 2 of the 4 icebreakers. We got 2 more to go, and then we'll start getting into like actual conversation here.
I can dig it.
So a celebrity that you can answer it one of 2 ways if you choose, however you choose. Celebrity that you most identify with, or a celebrity that you would most like to hang out with.
Oof. It's going to be Bill Murray for both.
Oh, perfect.
Yep.
Nice. I was kind of getting a little afraid that maybe you didn't have a sense of humor.
You're
speaking very, very smart, but clearly you do if you like, the one William.
Yeah, I can't channel it all the time, but I think sometimes I'm a pretty funny individual, but in different environments, I'm like kind of guarded in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a blind date, so you can be as guarded as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think a lot of times when things are going on, I'm the kind of guy that would like snap a look over at the audience and be like, this is a bunch of shit right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's, I don't know. He's just definitely one of my idols. And I would definitely just go ahead and say Bill Murray for president. Let's go.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to give it like a little side question then. Favorite like one-liner of Bill Murray's?
Oh man, he said I think it was like legalize all weed throughout the country and take all the funds to fill the potholes, and we can call it Operation Pothole.
Genius.
Yeah,
awesome. I like in Zombieland when he's dying and they say, "Do you have any regrets?" And he said, "Nope." Well, Garfield, I guess. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, which brings me to the final icebreaker question. The best binge watch of your life.
Oof. Westworld was good, but that's not it. It's got to be Cosmos for sure.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's an awesome one. I think that's like the first fact-based, or I don't want to say fact because I don't want to offend anybody that is a sensitive Susie, but
at least it distinguishes
study-based. It's not like a fictional event.
It does. I think it just does a good job at distinguishing between theory, fact.
Right.
Searching for evidence, compiling all the evidence to elevate the hypothesis to the theory, and then it just pours through them. But then at the same time, it says the government had financial interest to not acknowledge the evidence. And then you had one dude that was like, no, this is what's happening. I've collected the data and I am confident in my data collection and you guys need to recognize it. And when that triumphs, it helps everybody, like public health. It's just how science should work. And I really am very appreciative that they would be able to put it all in a very easily digestible media and very beautifully, aesthetically well done.
Yeah.
And I think it was episode 8 or 9, but just the whole feeling of how dynamic the surface of the planet was, all the tectonic plates shifting around and cataclysmic events, earthquakes and volcanoes and asteroid impacts. And then at the same time, life is so dynamic and so adaptive that it finds a way. And then it brings us all the way to where we are today. And then it does flash like shots of different people's faces from different cultures. And it shows you how diverse people can be.
Oh, absolutely.
And then initially where you have that feeling, it's like, I can't be connected to that person, but we are, and we're all in it together. So
right. The thing I liked about that show so much was that it offered imagery. I wish I was the guy that would like read books because I like the idea of deep thought and, an imagination. However, I think I'm too hungry for as much as I could get to take the time to necessarily read, something like a Stephen Hawking book or something like that. There's just too much stuff in there that I don't really know, and I kind of need somebody to feed me some sort of imagery to go along with, just so I understand it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm definitely a very visual learner, and I definitely think that was a great series to offer some sort of, you know, kind of fill in some of the blanks of the things that I didn't understand to help me understand some things. So
yeah, I absolutely agree, because I've had Cosmos, the book, sitting on my bookshelf for like 6 years, and then when I heard Cosmos was coming out, plus I've been following Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson,
yeah,
and as soon as I heard that he was going to host that TV show, I was like telling everybody, I was like, you've got to watch it, it's coming out, and I was like sitting, waiting, like staring at the TV, because I never watch TV. I really watch most of my content from like YouTube
right,
or Audible, but man, when that show was coming on, like I'm sitting there staring at Fox, like watching the commercials, like I cannot wait for this to come on. And it came on, and I would just be, I would shut my mind off completely. Like it is such a useful thing to be able to do. Like, and also, I mean, like it could very easily be a bad thing to do, to shut your mind off. But that internal dialogue, the constant chatter that's happening, you know, monks have to go through a lot of discipline to be able to sit and shut their minds off and quiet themselves. But to watch that, I'm definitely an audio visual learner as well.
right.
But to be able to just sit there and take in like a 45 minute long episode and come out of it feeling like just like smarter, but at the same time, like not that I'm smart, but just that I have the ability to access this information and be a conduit for the same,
right. And
hopefully the same thing.
And you have to be able to, you know, it's not like one of those things. It's like watching something be performed step by step. Like if you're watching like a how-to manual on how to do something, you can't hit play and watch the first step and then look down at your phone and be distracted for, you know, 3-4 minutes and then pick up and go, oh, they're on step 7. Like you need to know what happened, for the missing steps. And I think that style of learning definitely lends itself to, you know, it's something to keep you stimulated, your mind stimulated, and to literally only focus on that one thing while you're watching it. So
absolutely.
All right. So next little segment is give me your life in 3 minutes.
Okay. I got my timer ready.
If you want to, I've never actually held anybody to it. My wife told me that she thinks I need to start holding people to it.
All right.
But
ready,
I don't really care.
And go. My name was given to me, Joshua Thomas Moser. I didn't get to pick it, but that's how it goes. I was the 4th child, my oldest sister, then 2 brothers, then me. My parents were from Indiana. Then they moved to Wisconsin with me for a year. And then they were like, damn, this is cold. Then they went down to North Carolina and Virginia area. And then that's pretty much where our family stayed. We're 28 seconds in.
Okay.
So I went through school, C student, never really applied myself too much, but I was a pretty social butterfly. I was a late developer. Like I hit puberty at like 22 straight up. I graduated high school like 5'4", now I'm 6 foot. And I did not ever really know what I wanted to do. When I came out of high school, I still didn't really have a plan. And I always tell people that the Air Force was the best decision that my dad made for me, because also my oldest brother, he does fuel systems for F-22s and also works on A-10s.
Okay.
And he was like, hey man, if you're going to join the military, you might as well just join the Air Force. And if you're not fully committed, do the reserves. It'll keep you busy. It'll give you something to do. And then, you know, don't just go and sign up for any job. Take your time, figure out something that you're interested in. I heard about medic. I did it. I love it. It's given me the ability to just be a, bystander and then see some kind of tragedy happen. And then I can just walk in and then coolly and confidently intervene in a way that's going to help people. And then, like I said before, after watching Cosmos, I was like, well, I got to study physics. So then I've been for about 6 years studying physics, but also not the best at math. So it's been a grind. Okay. And I also kind of have ADD unless I limit all the distractions, and then I can actually get something done.
Gotcha.
So I've got Calc 3 coming at me this next semester.
Jeez.
And yeah, it's happening. And then linear algebra. Still got a minute left. So I spend, like I said before, I'm kind of a conduit for a very like select group of either authors or scientists. And I almost don't even want to insinuate that just because I can call their names, it makes me like associated with them, because I feel like it's like undeserved.
Okay.
But if I can talk about anything, it would be that select group of people, because what they've produced has been amazing. And yeah, that's about it. Also, my life has been so cushy, and I've been so selfish through it, like just working out all the time because my siblings, 15 seconds, my siblings have like, put their lives into their children now to give them a good life. And I don't have any kids, and I don't plan on it anytime soon. But in the meantime, also my finances aren't the best, but I'm not in any debt.
Right. So they're great, actually.
Yeah, and that's all the time we have for Josh.
That is amazing. Like I'm really proud of you. I'm really impressed with the punctuality on that. That's outstanding. So you're going to school, majoring in physics. You claim you're not good at math, but I mean you're already at calculus 3 or something like that. Like I have a bachelor's degree in it, and I'll be honest, I finished my associates. And as I was going for my bachelor's, I was trying to find any degree I could find that required no more math. And I found one, and I'm super stoked on it. Now I'm working on my MBA, and actually, oddly enough, my assignment that is due next week is, I haven't even started it yet, but I read the thing that was like, this week's assignment, we're going to refresh your math skills. And I was like, oh God, here we go. It's just going to be bad. So majoring in physics, what are your aspirations and hopes to do with a degree in physics?
I hope that one day I can know how to answer that question.
Okay. Yeah.
Because after watching Cosmos, it just seemed like physics was, how you understand what a problem is, how you understand how to create an approach, and then how you create the solution. Okay. So, and so many times I've had gentle encouragements from my social group and my family to just be like, yeah, maybe you should change majors. Like, you obviously like exercise science. You spend all your time watching fitness YouTube videos and working out. Why don't you just stop bashing your head against Calc 2 for the third time? Like, withdraw from it and then fail it and then do it again.
But you're interested in it.
Well, math is more like, I don't like running, but I do it because I know it's good for me.
Right.
It's like, I know I haven't really enjoyed math much, but it'd also be like I'm running with poor form, kind of. Okay. Because I think my natural ability to run is actually quite good. Okay. But my math, like the diligence and my like determination to solve an equation or to solve a problem, it's like I go until it's done and correct, and then I'm like, ugh, like I wash my hands of it, I'm done. Okay. That's the total wrong perspective to have. In fact, I've had my buddy who's a nuclear engineering major at NC State. He told me to don't solve the problem until you get it right. Solve it until you can't get it wrong. You have to drill it into your brain, and also you have to enjoy the process. If you sit there and hate it the whole time, you're going to feel, a huge amount of relief when you get your homework done, but you're not going to want to go back through and find out what you messed up on.
I mean, not to downplay what you're involved in, but if you can apply that just to something as simple as homework, think about how much, I mean, not to sound like I'm preaching like a training video or something.
Teach me a ways, master.
But I mean, it really does. You're going to be 100 times more resilient for anything in your life. There's a video that's like circulated all over YouTube. Pretty much anytime you watch a video, it probably pops up, and it's this admiral at like a graduation commencement speech talking about if you do one thing with your day, wake up and make your bed. And then he goes on this big long rant about how by doing that, you're going to have a sense of fulfillment, and it's going to take you to the next task and this, that, and the other thing. And when you come home, right, to get in your bed at the end of the day, you're going to see that it started with where you made your bed, and now you climb in feeling even more accomplished because you have this imagery for the things that you've done with your day. And I think that I'm always fascinated in those life lessons that somebody says something and it's got so many applications. And I think that saying of, do something until you can't get it wrong is spot on for that. It's just having the
determination or discipline.
The determination, the discipline, the charisma, the endurance to apply that to multiple things in your life, as opposed to just being, well, I do that with one thing in my life, and I'm kind of trashy at everything else.
Yeah. Well, also at the same time, what kind? I think I owe my current position just to being stubborn, and because I always tell myself, like, what if Einstein was like, ugh, I didn't do so good in that math class, and somebody's like, well, maybe you should study like accounting, and then he's like, all right, might as well. Right. The world would not be better off if he just change. And I'm not saying I'm going to be the next Einstein or anything. I think I'm going to be some kind of weird hybrid that is just, like I said, a conduit for a variety of ideas that hopefully, like what I would really want to be when you boil it all down is I want to be a adequate physicist that's good at trying to recognize problems, and I want to be a good medic.
Okay.
And I'm in no rush to accomplish those tasks, and I don't necessarily want to just work to position myself to work at a company. I just want to have the ability to do that,
Well, I can tell just I can just tell talking to you that you're very introspective and kind of insightful. You don't just look at, why do we do this? Because he said so. We do this because this, that. And you kind of want to know the who, what, when, where, why, how to a lot of things that you approach. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I'm glad I'm giving off that vibe.
Yeah, definitely. And you had mentioned, to give everybody that's listening kind of a little background, what I did is I put out feelers on a Facebook page here on Base, just saying, is anybody here into podcasting? And, I know it's kind of a niche market but I really didn't know what to expect. And I had a handful of people reach out to me, and I don't honestly know if I was trying to just not lure. I hate that word.
He got me.
Lure.
He got me on the blind date.
Lure sounds really strange. But I didn't know if I was just trying to gravitate people that I was trying to interview for this, or if I was trying to find somebody to just start up a whole different series or a whole different show altogether. I don't know. But,
well, I would say it is similar to casting a lure and seeing what you catch.
Right. Exactly.
But what I was doing was, I honestly don't even go through social media too often, but this Insulic 411 page, I'm like, well, shoot, I've got to, get engaged with the local area. And, I saw some jiu-jitsu out there, wrestling club, this and that. And so I'm trying to get my feelers out there because I'm only here for a little bit of time. I'm trying to pack my days full of experience.
Right. And I'll tell you firsthand, you can spend, if you just sit in your house, this place will drive you nuts.
Absolutely.
The first month I'd go to work, I would come home, and the weekend would roll around. And because I'm so used to being a father and a husband on Saturday morning, I was like, I have nothing to get up for. So I guess I'll just keep laying here.
Yep.
And, started feeling sorry for myself and all that kind of stuff. So you got to, and that's just, I advise everybody in life, get up and just keep going. Make your bed, like I said.
Yeah. It kind of cascades into other things.
Right. Right. And one of the things, is kind of, I guess we sort of did some icebreakers before we actually started. And I just said, what are some of your interests? One of the things about doing a podcast is you're kind of exercising your ability just to meet somebody and find something to talk about, which I think is a decent skill in life in general. But you had mentioned that you were into physics, medicine, because you're obviously doing that with your Air Force career. But then also you mentioned a little bit about, is it Taoism or Taoism? Or is it both?
It's spelled Taoism, but it's pronounced Taoism.
Okay.
Yep.
And right before we started, you said you're not an expert in that. And, it's kind of even part of the philosophy not to speak about something that you don't understand. But I literally know absolutely nothing about it. So enlighten me as to what it is and how that aligns with your belief system within life. If you could do it kind of like a 20,000 foot view, just a kind of a simple idea of it. Because I'm sure that we could totally dig down into the weeds, and we might. But just for the ignorant person out there that just heard the word Taoism and said, that sounds scary. What is that?
Right. Okay. So anytime you've ever seen the yin yang symbol,
right,
the intermingling of white and black shading, that in a sense is what Taoism is, at least from my understanding.
Okay.
Lao Tzu, or it's a Chinese philosophy. I don't believe it to be a religion, and some people say that Buddhism also isn't a religion; it's more of a philosophy. I was raised Christian. I don't know if I mentioned that in my 3-minute synopsis.
Okay.
And growing up, and at least my current views now, is that I still really do appreciate a lot of the values of Christianity.
Okay.
Jesus is an excellent example, and I do believe that he died full well believing that he was absolving me and everybody else of their sins.
Okay. Provided
that they're willing to ask for forgiveness and recognize that they're sinful. But also being a scientist, I don't necessarily know if sins are like empirical or like, totally absolutely real in the sense of some kind of scientific concept.
Okay.
But I'm getting off
No,
topic.
I think you're definitely staying on topic because I think, relative to, the American culture and the American way of thinking, I think it's a common, if anything, you're paralleling what you're finding a common ground or a basis to jump off of. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Meeting my buddy Steven, he was the gentleman that was accompanying me when I was in that garden that was a memorial built for the girl that died at East Carolina University.
Right.
He was one of those guys. When I said he instilled about 18% of my worldview, it's because he would just kind of very subtly check my preconceived notions about myself or our culture or just everything. And I really appreciate him for that, because if he didn't, it wouldn't have gotten me to start digging into Buddhism. And now I've got 2 sets of dog tags, one of them that I was issued initially when I first joined, and then the ones that I got issued for this deployment. And the ones that I have now, or the old ones, say Christianity or Christian, and the ones that I have now say Buddhism. But
let me cut you off really quick just to explain. Anybody that's listening that's not affiliated with the military, it's kind of an old thing. The dog tag thing. It's like you'd go to war and you'd have a necklace. You always see it in all the war movies and stuff like that. But the idea being that if you were disfigured or killed or whatever, you had something that they could easily identify who you were. They're made out of really rugged, durable metal, and the information on there is your name, social security number, blood type, and religious preference. So, Josh is explaining that he kind of flipped script a little bit. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's a good evaluation of for those of those who do not know.
I mean, yeah, considering like the gravity and the intent of those, obviously you're probably not going to get murdered here in
chances
Turkey.
are low.
But, in the event, I mean, that is kind of, it's like filling out a will almost as you leave for a deployment. You're not 100% sure you're coming back. And if you do perish while you're there, that was kind of like your final statement. So.
Right. So, but it's funny though, because I've reflected quite a bit, like the contradiction of having Buddhism imprinted on dog tags. You know what I mean?
Really?
Because, so Buddhism, I'm always gonna be developing my understanding of it. And I don't know if I'm gonna shave my head and join a monastery, but when you said your religion of preference, it's because I prefer Buddhism over most any other religion, because at the basis it is trying to develop a level of mindfulness and calmness and compassion.
Okay.
And even though the other day I was walking through PV, a wonderful establishment, we can talk about that if you like, but a really large fly zipped past me. The ones that are like,
oh yeah. Like we call them horse flies.
Yeah. And I, without even thinking, I had snapped my boonie hat off my head and did one quick slash and knocked it out of the sky, and it was on the ground just like buzzing in a circle.
Right.
And immediately felt regret for, basically condemning this thing to die.
For a fly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Buddhism is all about having compassion for all living things.
Right.
And so even though I prefer Buddhism, I don't think I embody its characteristics very well. They do have 5 precepts, and honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them all. But it's, do not partake in any illicit sexual behavior. Don't partake in like alcohol or any illicit drugs. And, don't kill anything.
Essentially just be a good person.
Yeah. I mean, they're very easy central tenets, and they're called precepts because it's like you are going to accept the restriction, but at the same time, it's going to like ease in your burden for like going through life.
Okay.
But so, yeah, I felt a little remorse, but at the same time, my dad raised me to be a hunter. And if I need to procure food for my family, then I'm going to basically put a bullet straight through the base of the skull, or the base, right through the central nervous system of whatever complex creature I'm planning on eating on, because I want to kill it quickly and I don't want it to suffer any longer than it has to.
So did you feel compelled to get down and eat the fly?
I stepped directly on it and crushed it.
Right, yeah. Put it out of its misery.
Yeah. It's called a coup de grace in French, I believe.
Okay.
It's a finishing blow.
Yeah, I mean, I can identify with that. Like, I'm a firearms fanatic. Love it. I love guns. Never killed anything with a gun, though. And I have friends that are like, oh, you need to go hunting with me and this, that, and the other thing. And, I remember you ever seen the movie My Cousin Vinny?
Yes.
You know the part where Marissa Tomei goes on the tangent. She goes, "You're going to go hunting? You're going to go hunt a bear or a deer?"
Yeah.
And she goes, and all of a sudden, like rip off half its skull. Are you really going to care what kind of pants the son of a bitch who shot you was wearing? Like, it's one of my favorite parts of a movie ever.
Yeah, I love that.
But oddly enough, I think I identify a little bit with Marissa Tomei in that way. Like, I think about the living creature and it suffering, because I'm honestly, I've eaten deer meat before and I don't really like the taste.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of funny how everybody loves going out shooting deer, but not many people really love venison. They're always like, yeah, I cut the meat with 80% ground beef and it's 20% deer meat. You're like, why don't you just buy the ground beef if you're gonna, whatever. I digress, but
No, you're good.
But I think I identify with that. Like, the idea of going out and killing an animal kind of disturbs me just a little bit, unless it was out of sheer necessity.
Yeah,
if there was an apocalypse going on,
absolutely,
I would have no problem.
Yeah, I've listened to quite a few audiobooks about the apocalypse, and let me assure you, any of those scenarios don't play out very well. And
never.
Ideally, we would be able to embody compassionate points of views throughout that, but I'd say chances are slim when you and your, God forbid, you're starving to death or you had to procure food for your family. And it's just very, very difficult to be able to sympathize with that. And that's why it's the spirit in which you kind of deal with these topics. I don't want to incite any kind of fear, because that's the last thing I want to do. I want people to recognize that, they have a significant amount of effect over their life and their universe. And if we can all appreciate each other, then we don't have to get to that point.
Right.
We might also have to, work together as far as trying to be more self-sufficient and depend less on really complex systems like energy or food, food production.
Mm-hmm.
If we could be a little bit more self-sustainable, it would be a lot easier. So that way, if anything did happen, it would be oh, well, luckily I have as many seeds as I need to be able to grow the right amount of calories, even given a large percentage of crops might die, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But it's, if anything, I hope that just sets someone down the path of trying to be self-sufficient, because it only takes 100 few people to be genetically diverse enough to be able to breed and not have a bunch of anomalies with their genetic structure. So we can keep the species going if this civilization collapses, in the off chance that it does.
Right.
But I definitely would like to reapproach the whole concept of hunting and trying to be compassionate.
Yeah.
Because when I went hunting with my brother, maybe a year ago, he instinctively saw a deer, saw a 4-pointer, and it was a decent sized buck, and he just instinctively, it's in season, he doesn't think about it oh, maybe I should let it go for next year and then it'll be bigger, I'll shoot it. He was we don't have any meat, we're hunting, we have a gun, it's
Drop
loaded,
it.
boom,
Drop
it's done.
it. Yeah.
He shoots it, it falls down in the creek, but it's just struggling. And then I'm kind of looking around well, I don't see any other deer. I'm not scaring anything away. I just line up on it, pull one through its head.
Right.
So that's my version of hunting. And otherwise, I'll sit in a tree stand. I'll basically just watch wildlife all night or all day. And that's how I hunt. If a giant 700-pound bear came out, then I would consider shooting it. But
yeah, self-defense is a whole different story. You're not hunting at that point. You're
I don't know. I'm kind of, to be totally real, if I did see a massive, giant bear, I don't know if, I might consider shooting it, because my dad would his input into my brain would just be you're going to waste the opportunity to shoot a giant bear. So, I'm not saying I'm I'm a good practicing Buddhist. I'm saying that I want to reduce the amount of unnecessary killing and suffering.
Yeah,
as much as possible.
Well, I mean, what's the saying that they say about about Buddhism is that you're trying to come with peace of things, and you're trying to be more of one mind and less divided in your own mind. That's something I heard about Buddhism a long time ago. So if that's the truth, that you are trying, I mean, you're forever going to be in conflict in your mind. And I think a lot of religions actually hit on that, like within Christianity, we are sinners no matter what. But if you really are, following the Bible, your life is trying to be as free of sin as possible. But you're wired for it. You're gonna sin. It's gonna be what it is. And even to this comparison, you're going to be preconceived. You're going to be a product of your environment, and you're not going to be able to help those instinctual urges. But you can try. You can be aware of it, so that you are trying to be, of peace with one path in your mind at all times.
Right. Yeah, I can stack the deck, and then when put in that situation, I will act accordingly, and then I'll have to manage, how that worked out, and I'm sure it'll work out fine. But I remember one time, same brother, I have two of them, both of them are pretty good at hunting, but there was a maybe 4 or 5 foot water moccasin swimming up out of the water towards us, and he took a shot at it, he got it, and then we're like kind of staring at this water moccasin, and I was like, it's kind of a waste. Like, that thing is pretty complex. It's kind of like a apex predator in its environment, and I felt like it was kind of a waste to just shoot it and leave it there. But then again, something was going to eat it up. Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. It's like squirrel meat or something.
Yeah. So I was like, well, this is kind of an excellent opportunity for me to learn how to field dress a water moccasin and do it safely, because, if you try to like grab a snake, even if it's dead, it still has that, it still has the ability to articulate just through its like muscle memory and get its fangs into your arm, even if it's dead. Yeah. So I like step on its head. I don't know how graphic or if you worry about anything like that, but I removed the head and then field dressed it and basically had it all set up to eat just for the sake of doing it. Yeah. Because it was convenient enough.
Did you eat it?
I did not eat it, but I'm not above eating a snake if I have to.
Yeah, but you guys knew you were going to stop off at like In-N-Out on the way home or something.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And also, for the record, I'm not a vegetarian, because since being here for about a month and a half, I've put on 10 pounds just by facing an insane amount of chicken and fish.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Well, right on. Obviously, I will say, meeting you're not the picture book of what, you don't meet the milieu of what I would think a Buddhist would look like, or even an aspiring Buddhist, or even somebody that thinks, that it's they're fascinated by the belief system.
Well, that's interesting that you would say that, because that brings us full circle, because the reason I even brought that up in the first place is to talk about Taoism, because in practice, I believe I'm a Taoist, which is a philosophy, but it means the way. Okay. The way of the universe. And there are two things. There's principle and process. And Taoism is largely recognizing a paradigm like light and dark, and recognizing what is going on in that paradigm through dialogue or through meditation, or, just focusing your attention on something. So when it comes to hunting, the Taoism, or like the reality of the situation, we have to talk about it from a variety of views, like animal rights. Did that deer or bear or snake deserve to die? Right. Well, what were the legality of the situation? Was it ethically questionable? Definitely. Was it, if the circumstances were different, would it allow, your family to survive a little longer? Perhaps. So by, digging through these situations, and I think another concept I wanted to drop in here is called Wu Wei, which is like a path of least resistance. I wouldn't want to go out of my way to field dress a snake, but just because everything lined up, it put me in that situation to use it. So give another example of like a life application. How do you say that? It's Wu Wei? Wu Wei. Wu Wei. What's like another life application? Just like a really broad I've got one
broad scope.
Actually, I really try to. I don't know if it definitely doesn't count as a religion, but two main philosophies that I go by is Taoism and Wu Wei, and I'm always trying to make my life efficient. When I go to pick up my book bag, I can demonstrate it, but I'll grab with my right hand the left strap on the top part. And then in one smooth motion, I will lift it off the ground, slide it onto my left arm, let the backpack drape down over my shoulders, and then after swinging it up with my right arm, I'll sling my arm back and catch the other loop with my other arm, so my book bag's on in almost one totally smooth motion.
So it's a smooth motion, but is it like based on efficiency?
It is definitely movement economy, and it happens through muscle memory, and it's like taking multiple sequences of movements, but through repetition, you just make it all happen very smoothly. And then another one is I do a lot of longboarding at Wilmington when I'm riding around campus.
Okay.
And when I come in to my destination, and maybe in like 2 or 3 pushes, I can be going about top speed. I'm going pretty fast. And then when I get towards my destination, I will put my left front foot on top of the truck, the front truck.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will shift all of my weight over the truck in like onto the nose. And then I will have my right hand ready to catch the back of the board as I shift my weight over the fulcrum and create a torque, a twisting force. It's like a seesaw. It pops up over that truck, slides right into my hand, and so I'm going top speed and then kick the board up over its nose into my hand, and I'm walking with it, dragging it from mine. I might not be doing a very good job articulating it, but mind you, I'm coming like maybe 15 miles an hour into a walk while I'm dragging my board, and it is one smooth motion.
I think I can picture it, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and so that would be one of those things that you're watching somebody like, otherwise you're going to have to stop. You have to get off your board. I mean, it happens 100 times every hour on campus. Everybody's, riding their longboards, but it's nice to recognize, you have to pick your board up every time you're done riding before you go up the stairs. So it's just nice to be able to recognize the sequence of events and then know and drill a way of doing it that just looks so smooth and so slick. And if something is like not like that, like I have a friend that is basically the antithesis of Wu Wei, and I love her, and she's a great person, and I hang out with her because it's like a kind of Zen training for me to be able to be patient and considerate of people who are like very out of phase with other people. And I don't know, like, I don't mean it to seem like I'm slinging shade at her, because I'm not. She's a wonderful person, but she is just a good example of
how not to do it.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't think it was on a podcast episode. I think I was actually just talking to a family member recently when I was back home about how much I appreciate people that provide that how not to live your life kind of manual.
Yeah.
I had an uncle that I grew up. He was a drug addict. He ended up dying of a heroin overdose. He was in and out of jail all the time and made a lot of very bad life decisions. But right there, that's how I was able to, even as a kid, that's how I saw my Uncle Ron. Is he was the guy that made bad life decisions, and he got involved with drugs and the law in a capacity that ended up affecting his life in a very bad manner, and I associated those thoughts and those drugs with that outcome.
Right.
And I always looked at him and I always thought, oh, well, if you do drugs, you'll be, impoverished and you'll have issues with the law. Okay, I'm not going to do that, which for me was perfect because I ended up in the music industry for a little while and there was drugs everywhere all the time. Mm-hmm. But I was never the person that had any interest in that because my mind was made up my entire life, which is probably fantastic just because of the exposure. Statistically speaking, I would have probably fallen for something hook, line, and sinker, and I could have very well ended up in a very bad situation. But thank God for that how not to manual. And
well, that's very interesting because he, even though, yeah, it's pretty objectively obvious that he, did it the wrong way. But at the same time, his story gives you and hopefully other people the reference to avoid that kind of lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the same time, like the nuanced or, the unstated part about it would be that there's a level of like, yes, we're autonomous beings, we make our own decisions, but when it comes to like chemical hooks like that in the brain, I don't think, like, I'm irritated that my dad smokes as much as he does, but there's no form of rhetoric, the art of persuasion, that I can form and deliver to him that's going to be effective enough to get him to stop smoking, because I'm trying to use rhetoric over chemical dependence.
Right. Yeah, you're not that strong.
And so when I look at him, I'm like, I barely blame you. You're definitely the dude driving the bus, but they didn't, you couldn't have done it much in many other ways. I mean, I'm kind of irritated at the cigarette industry. I'm kind of mad at the heroin dealer, in other cases.
Right.
But it's important to, recognize how complicated it can be, and it's hard to stick blame on a person. It's like,
I think the way that you just described that finally gave me peace and understanding why they say that addicts of any kind they have a disease. Yeah. I don't know if you listen to have you ever listened to Dax Shepard's podcast?
I have not, but I've heard my supervisor recommended it.
It's fantastic. He is a surprisingly intelligent individual. He has his degree in anthropology.
Nice.
But he's also very intent on still practicing that. He was, the goofy guy from comedic movies, but he's a real sharp guy. Can't recommend it enough.
Yeah.
But he's also very, very open about the fact that he is like 12 or 13 years sober now, because he is a raging addict of any kind. And like I always hear the people talk about, well, it's the disease. It's the disease. It's the disease. And I never understood that, because I used to smoke, and yeah, something would fire off in my brain and say, time to go smoke a cigarette, But I think more than anything, it was just a habit, like, oh, I'm finished eating. Time to have a cigarette, got out of a 3-hour-long movie. Thank God I needed a cigarette now. I feel like it was more habitual than anything than to call that, that addiction that I had a disease. But I think that, drawing or highlighting the fact that it is a chemical working on your body and your body reacting to it would kind of allude more to a disease than anything.
Yeah.
It's a physical reaction that you cannot turn mind over matter. And in fact, I had to put another drug in my body to be able to quit. And I did the
nicotine patches.
I did Chantix.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And some people, like, it didn't work for my wife when she tried to do it. She had a bunch of nightmares, and I know a lot of people that they said, oh man, that didn't work on me. I had all kinds of crazy side effects. And I joke around that the only side effect it gave me was that it made me hate cigarettes.
Nice.
Because I did it, and then...
Well, adverse reactions can just be totally different for different people.
Right. But I mean, I think it's interesting I think you helped me find an identification there that it is a disease. And you think that somebody can just overcome it by saying, I'm not going to do that anymore. And there are people that do, yeah. But I would argue maybe their disease wasn't as bad.
Another interesting thing to bring up is the idea of identities. One, we have that, the ability to be responsive to those chemical hooks. But another big part of that, which is probably one of the biggest parts, if you're really trying to beat something, is the ability to reform your identity about yourself. You have to be willing to change the way that you think about yourself. And that
goes back to the beginning too, of like how you pointed out, I asked you your favorite place, right? Mm-hmm. And you gave me your favorite environment. If you change your environment, how easy is it going to be for you to, change your identity?
It goes hand in hand for sure.
Right. I think that's why people go away to go to rehab. They have a very different identity in a rehabilitation center.
That's interesting, because I'm skeptical about rehab centers. I feel like that is, it could be just the nature of addiction and chemicals, but also return customers in business. I mean, I'm sure they're out and they, really want to help people, and I'm sure statistically they do help a significant amount of people. But I think, and I don't have any evidence to back this claim up, but going to a monastery and changing your environment that way and getting familiar with the idea of reevaluating what your identity is of yourself, I think that they would do a better job at that than rehab centers.
Oh, it's very, very likely. But I think the difference is the monks aren't making that their mission to go, try to heal the sick or the diseased, if you want to refer to them as that, because there's an industry, and anytime you get, American greed and, Western thinking, there's going to be somebody that wants to turn it into a money-making industry. Yeah. So maybe the monks just don't even stand a chance. Yeah,
and I've heard that. Yeah, I mean, they need to get on their marketing campaign, no doubt. No,
you need to hire the guys from Mad Men to do their advertising.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Spin-off, please.
Exactly. I pitch the show right now, but I get 50% of the royalties.
Right. Oh, come on.
I'll split them with you.
I just want to see it happen.
No,
cool.
We just talked about American greed, and I'm American, damn it.
Yeah, no, I mean, don't fight your nature that hard, but a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but so I think it really does. A lot of it comes down to identity, and a big chunk of Buddhism is recognizing that each person has an ego, and an ego is a sense of self-importance, and some people are have larger egos than other people. And it's funny too, because a lot of times when you bring up the ego, it is a very elusive topic, or it's something that people aren't really familiar with. And so they immediately kind of shy away from it. And the ego also doesn't like to be identified. I think Eckhart Tolle talked about that. There's a good book called The Power of Now that's, people should check out, especially if they don't like reading. It's very small and it's very powerful. It gets you to really just want to put your phone down and just sit there and breathe and be like, wow, this is really good right now.
Interesting.
But that's The Power of Now.
Okay.
So, but the big piece of Buddhism is obviously associated with meditation. And I've heard one of the most concise descriptions of meditation is, imagine going on a snowy hill with a sled and, one of those garbage can top sleds. Yeah,
like the one Clark W. Griswold put his non-nutritive cereal varnish, whatever. Go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly.
I've watched Christmas Vacation too many times.
Oh, yeah. So you get up to the top and you hop in your sled and you slide down and it makes an indention and you have a trail all the way down. And then you pick up your sled, you walk back up to the top, and then you sit back on the top. And this is an analogy. And then you go and sit back down your trash can lid and it slides right back into that same trail. And so if you going through life is like making those decisions. You're saying, I'm going to go do this, and then I'm going down this path. And then, okay, I got to the bottom, I'm going to go somewhere else, I'm doing something else. Well, hey, I'm back to this particular thing, I can make the decision. Well, I already know it's like the muscle memory or the neural pathway is already established. I'm just going to do it because it's like a path of least resistance. And if you don't put some effort into re-identifying yourself or bringing mindfulness to the situation or, really just kind of reflecting on what's happening at that moment, you'll just go right back into that path. Meditation is a fresh snowfall.
Every time? Is that the idea behind it? Is that it's every time it's a fresh snowfall?
It is, we'll say, different depths of snow. So if it's something you have to practice, but it's basically sitting down and breathing and listening to your environment and not letting your mind run too far away. And, your brain's always going to keep doing a constant chatter, but over time, it'll speak less and less, and you'll be able to just sit there. And that's kind of the goal, is to just turn that chatter off. And if you can do that, then whenever you get into a circumstance where you're like, well, I'm sitting at the same spot where I have to make a decision that I'm very familiar with and accustomed to, and it's probably going to be comfortable or enjoyable. If you can pause for a moment and take a deep breath and, you're not really thinking what is my identity? You're not really thinking about that stuff. You're just taking a breath. If you can, I think that, at least in the analogy that I was painting before, it's like snowing it back down onto the mountain, and then it gives you the option of saying, I don't want to go down that path. Maybe I'll
Okay.
go down this path instead.
It just makes you conscious enough to formulate clear decisions instead of reacting.
Absolutely. Developing mindfulness.
So you mentioned meditation 2 or 3 times now. Is that something that's part of your everyday life?
I would say that it is something that I do when my schedule permits it, and I should schedule it in more often.
Okay.
It's also one of those things that's like, like a devout Christian, they're like, I should pray more. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
somebody that, works out, they're like, I should stretch more.
Right.
So, we all have the little things that we would like to change, but it, if I'm really irritated or really upset, that's what I kind of try to go towards.
So, and I got to ask this question. I'm curious so for the last, it's almost been 2 weeks now. I've been having like a lot of trouble sleeping. Mm-hmm. Like I just can't sleep, which is crazy because I've always been the person to go like 100 miles an hour through the day, just really hard to the paint. And then the second it's time to go to bed, I put my head down and it's over. As long as I have a little bit of white noise going on in the background, turn on a fan and it's done, like lightning fast. Well, for the last almost 2 weeks, I think now, when I try to go to sleep, I just can't. And if I do, I'll fall asleep really quickly for like 2-3 hours. I'll wake up and then I can't fall back asleep. So, and the reason I'm tying this to meditation, this is a possible fix for me, is that I don't know how to turn off my brain at night when I'm trying to sleep. Right. I will literally have a thought that is like a ping pong ball bouncing down a hill. Like it just keeps going and going and going and going, and it goes from one topic to the next. They have nothing to do with each other. I'll literally be like, oh yeah, I need to remember to do that when I get to work tomorrow. And then tomorrow for lunch, I'm going to take something small, just like a half a sandwich or something like that. Because when I go to the gym, I'll go to the gym after work, and then I need to call somebody, and then it bounces into this like other dimension of just stuff that has nothing to do with tomorrow. And before I know it, now I'm like worried about things. And I think there's anxiety and stuff in that, just being alone and, grieving the loss of my mom and stuff like that. But at the same time, I think I could see how learning that art of clearing your mind could possibly help with something like that.
Absolutely. And, I feel like you are an emotionally intelligent person in the sense that you are recognizing your stress factors that are weighing on you, and you can articulate your like thought sequence on your brain's going to be jumping around to these different topics, but maybe
that's the funny thing when you're having trouble to sleep, you got nothing but time to think about this stuff.
Right. And it's almost like your body or your mind telling you something.
Right.
And if you don't like it, then there are things that you can do about it. So, have you ever heard of sleep hygiene?
No.
Okay.
I shower every night before bed, though.
Right. That's important, too. But so you've got hand washing hygiene. There's the germ theory. In fact, we mentioned it briefly. I don't know how many tangents we want to open just yet, but
yeah.
When I was a kid, my mom read me this book, and it was basically germ theory for kids, and it made me a germaphobe.
As a child?
Yeah. And then becoming a medic, I was like, well, there is just, nasty stuff everywhere, and it's not going to stop me from living my life. And then my sister had 4 kids, and they'd be like, Uncle Josh, come here. I've got a secret. And I'm like, yeah. And I chew right in my mouth. And I'm like, okay, great. So
I love my kids more than anything, but if their hands get anywhere near my face, I want to freak out.
Yeah.
Because, I've watched them.
They touch everything.
They touch everything, but like, this is too graphic, but I got to say it because it's just great. I mean, these are the stories you can't make up. So I was home on leave for a month, and I was sitting there cuddling with my daughter, and her and my son were actually both cuddling with me simultaneously. And they were kind of bickering with each other. And then I was like, what in the actual hell is that? There's a poop smell. Like, one of you guys need to go brush your teeth. And I was like, let me smell your breath. And my daughter, blew her breath on my face. And I was like, no, it's not you. And my son, I was like, no, it's not you either. And I was like, what smells like poop? And my daughter, like, without missing a beat, she goes, I scratched my butthole a minute ago. I'm like, oh my God. I think I'm going to throw up in my mouth. And you just had your hands all over my face. I'll be back. No. I'm going to go, like, smother myself in bleach. Go wash yourself, you disgusting little thing. I love her more than anything. She's the best thing ever.
That is so awesome. Well, I mean, they just
disgusting.
Don't know.
Right, they don't know. I mean, they would if they had this hygiene book that you're talking about, which I need to get them.
Well, it's also, to learn anything, you have to repeat it over and over again. So when I go to my sister's kids' houses, I'm like the dude that they're like, yay, we get to wash our hands. Like I'm trying to like cultivate that kind of idea because it's like, look, you can hang out with me if one, you don't talk too much about nonsense.
You're the cool hand washing uncle.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I guess you could be you could be known for worse things.
Yeah, well, they call me Uncle Stinky if that's any kind of. I don't know how that name even came up because I feel like I'm a fairly clean individual, but I'm like maybe it's because I'm like calling out other people being dirty or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
But the reason I brought that up is because even though I was germaphobe, it just got me to be highly attuned to when my immune system is under attack.
Okay.
And so, and with the sneeze in the mouth thing, it's like, I know when I get sick, like, I'm working in a clinic on a regular basis. And when somebody comes in that's really sick, it's like, all right, he's touched this, he's touched that, he's touched that. I'm going to see him. I'm not going to act all weirded out. And then when he leaves, I'm going to wash my hands and then I'm going to grab the sandy wipes and I'm going to wipe down everything he touched. And then, when I get to lunch, it's like, well, I better eat some fresh oranges because I need some vitamin C and I better work out today because I don't want my immune system to decline. So all these like little factors come into play. And I haven't had like a legit full-blown cold in years just because I'm always on it with like a good, healthy amount of sleep and trying to make sure that my diet isn't working in conjunction with my natural processes.
There's obviously, I believe that there's some truth in you what's the saying? Like, you getting after it before it becomes an issue or whatever.
Right.
But I've done that before and I still get sick.
Yeah.
Like,
and well, you
getting
got
ready
kids,
to go
bro.
to well, yeah, but you're also like getting ready to go to go on vacation. You're going to be in the airports and stuff. And my wife we buy like the industrial Sam's Club size boxes of that emergency stuff or whatever, airborne, and we're popping that stuff left and right leading up to it. And sure enough, somebody comes home sick. So
right, there's only so much you can do.
There is, but I think being ahead of it is definitely
also a lot of times
good practice.
If I wake up and I have a stuffy nose, I'm like, oof, I'm gonna have to do some intense cardio today because it's like causing my body to do its own fever. And I feel like if I was a germ trying to invade my body, it'd be like, oh my God, this dude is a masochist. We need to bail out. So, and that's what I do. So then also my body, when I like go to sleep, it's like, okay, he's getting sick and he's not slowing down. So he's going to have to get an extra restful sleep to be able to kick this thing out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's probably weird that I'm like personifying my body's natural processes, but that's definitely how I think about it. And it seems to work out quite nicely.
Well, there's what's his name? The comedian Jim Brewer.
I listen to comedy and I love it, but for some reason I'm not placing the face to the name.
Did you ever see the movie Half Baked with Dave Chappelle?
Definitely.
Okay, so he's the white guy that's like with the
Looks
crazy hair.
super high all the time.
Yeah.
I listen to his comedy now.
Yeah. So he has a thing about how he personifies alcohol going into the body.
Nice. Oh yeah.
It is the funniest thing in the entire world. If you haven't ever heard it, definitely go check it out.
I'm pretty sure I have. I'm gonna have to check it out though.
So we're rounding the corner on kind of a deadline here, so we don't go forever. I wanted to hit.
Can I put a cap on what we were talking about?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. So with the hand hygiene, it's like you recognize, if you have the mindfulness to recognize that you've got immune system and you've got antimicrobial soap and you wash your hands for the proper amount of time and lather it up. Like there's very basic steps that you can take into account to be able to eliminate the germs off of your hands so that you can eat. And I pretty much only wash my hands before I eat and just never touch my mouth.
Right. And
so it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And it's, when put into application, it works quite effectively. With sleep hygiene, it's the same thing. Very simple things to take into account. It's hard to do because it's like habit-based and it's always a little tricky to develop the habits, but there's a system to be able to do it. In fact, the difference between like a dream and a goal is actionable steps. So if you have a goal to be able to sleep deeply, then there are actionable steps to address to be able to make it happen. So
such as
your sleep environment should be dark, quiet, dry, and by quiet I mean like you can have like a fan to drone on, just to cut down on any other kind of like disturbances that might wake you up.
No distracting noises.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then also taxing the body throughout the day will help you sleep. Like I did deadlifts 2 days ago and I slept real good that night because it just maxed out my central nervous system.
Okay.
And anytime I do a heavy lift like that, I know I'm going to sleep good.
Okay.
So that's another thing, which is counterintuitive to how most people think about it. They're like, I'm not going to work out because I'm tired. It's like, no, you will get more quality, restful sleep deeper than if you were to lay in bed all day long, because then you won't sleep at all. Like, you will sleep terribly if you lay in bed all day.
Right. Yeah. Hands down.
So there's that. Before you go to bed, don't stare at your phone for 30 minutes before you go to sleep. And that is something that I am also terrible at.
Yeah.
But that's why it's a habit thing. And if you have to value a deep, restful sleep more than you value entertainment. And
I swear these things are making us stupider, though.
Yeah.
That's a whole different conversation.
Well, it's like, that's why, I watch a lot of YouTube and I watch a lot of Audible, and I try not to watch a bunch of cat videos. But I'm not going to lie, I watch some cat videos from time to time.
You got to do it.
But I've got a very eclectic offline playlist. I've got that YouTube Premium, so I can download it when I'm connected to Wi-Fi, and when I'm offline, I can watch it all. Not here in Turkey because blah, 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 blah. But,
Right.
But yeah, I've got 450 videos of just random videos that I really enjoy, spanning from medicine to, classic rock and all this other good stuff, but Japanese concepts and stuff, or Eastern philosophies and stuff. So, I think there's some other components to sleep hygiene that I wanted to mention, but meditation would also help that too, because if you're not going to be looking at your phone for 30 minutes before bed, you could be sitting quietly or reading a book that isn't very taxing on your attention span, something that's enjoyable.
Right.
That way you're not blasting your eyes full of blue light, which is basically telling your brain, hey, it's daytime, hey, it's time to move because we're not nocturnal. And so I would highly recommend doing that. And if you can do that and just try to compound those things, just like washing your hands, not touching your face, and I feel like you would definitely see results. And then also, you're in a very tricky spot in your life, at least right now. And it's good that you can recognize that, and I'm glad that I get to spend time with you and talk with you about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though I'm not talking to you, but I feel like I'm talking to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
But it's just, I feel very privileged to be able to have this discussion with you, because I'm always, you learn by repeating, and it's only reinforcing those concepts for myself and for any of the listeners out there that think that their sleep quality is subpar. Joe Rogan interviewed a neurologist about sleep. I'm sure you can just look up Joe Rogan sleep, and he breaks it all down again, but he makes a 2-hour long, powerful argument that we need to start valuing our sleep more, because it is one of the most important things that that comes into play with our health, long term. Yeah. And also recovery for fitness as well.
No, people are always hesitant to pay for mattresses, but you spend the better majority of your time there.
Absolutely.
Right? That's kind of a real simplistic, way to tie that in, but
simplicity
it's totally true.
Is the best. In fact, we haven't even got to my favorite Japanese topic, but we might have to save it for another day if we're short on time. But simplicity is key, and there is an elegance to the simplicity. And if you can avoid a doctor and avoid, having somebody have to go through med school and learn all these different specialties and have a whole network of doctors to be able to address everything that can happen to a person. If you can avoid all that just by sleeping adequately, working out cautiously, eating, cautiously, and, proper movement patterns, avoiding high-risk activities, then you can live your entire life without a doctor, and you can live a very healthy life, and people will look at you and be like, you don't need this elaborate healthcare system. It's no, I just ascribe to very simple principles, and they all work out fine. I drink plenty of water, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you take care of your body, and your body will take care of itself. And I think there's too many people in America that are not even just America. It's kind of just worldwide now, because I've been all over the world now, and the one constant is McDonald's and Starbucks now. But those sugary frappuccino drinks and the French fries that can sit under your seat for a lifetime and still look the same. Yeah, that's all the stuff everybody's putting in their body.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I have eaten my fair share of frappuccinos and McDonald's French fries.
Yeah, you got to do it. I mean, it's a rite of passage.
True.
So I guess the last thing I wanted to hit on kind of goes back to the whole idea of, like favorite places, but also kind of ties into obviously some concepts and stuff that you identify with. Have you ever traveled to Asia at all?
I have not.
And is it anywhere? Is it just is it a priority to you? No,
not particularly.
Not particularly, really.
Yeah.
Because I think with some of your thought processes, like you would want to immerse yourself in that. But if I'm wrong, I digress and we can call it a day.
Yeah, I have a romantic appreciation for the Japanese culture, and it was cultivated from a book that I read called Shibumi.
Okay.
Except it's not a book that I just read. I read it, and then I listened to it on Audible, and then I read it again, and then I listened on Audible, like pretty much.
You've digested
constantly.
It multiple times.
Yeah, I've made notes on it, and it's the best book I have ever read, and yeah.
What's the synopsis on it?
I feel like almost everything I can get out of what is appreciable about not just Japanese culture, but a life worth kind of living from this book. So my first time that I had a friend that had a substance abuse problem, his father passed away and left him a giant inheritance, and the rest of his remaining family, his dad and mom got divorced. I don't really want to shell out all his life stuff, but basically after his father died, he said leave it all to the boy, and all of his family tried to get him medically disqualified for being insane or an addict, to take everything away from him. And so he had a pretty rough time with that, as anybody would. And it just got me to recognize that money isn't everything, and in fact, it can be the bane of all existence.
Right.
And but through hanging out with him, he was an incredibly nice person to me, and he gave me this book and said, "My dad gave me this book, and it's something that we always enjoyed, and I want you to have it." And so he gave me it, and I read it, and the first 80 pages were the driest thing I could ever imagine. And I had no idea what to expect, but it's called Shibumi, Shibumi.
Okay.
By Trevanian, I believe is what his name is. So I didn't know what to expect, but the first few pages were pretty dry, and then it became the best book I've ever read.
Interesting.
Shibumi means elegant simplicity.
Okay.
Or understated elegance in Japanese. And what's really funny is the book is, it spans over cultural and national comparisons. It talks about like traditional Japanese culture before it was Americanized after World War II. Mm-hmm. And it talked about a man who didn't have a nationality and who had no strict association with his lineage, and he is just the most dynamic person that I can imagine. Like when I think of the most dynamic archetype of a person, it's like Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty, or the Nikolai Alexandrovich Hell, or whatever his name is.
Okay. From
Shibumi, because they're just cool, calm, collected, ready to respond to any kind of situation effectively. And yeah, it's great. I'm actually like 3/4 of the way through it now, just for deployment, because I just love listening to it. And also the person that narrates it on Audible does a wonderful job. Like
okay.
There's so many different people from different cultures, and the main character, he speaks like 5 different languages. So, but I can't really tell you or the listeners much about the plot, because it's too easy to be able to capture your attention with a few words, but it's not going to be enough to be able to make you want to read it.
Okay.
You have to want to go out of your way to listen to this book, and to be able to be bored for the first 50 or 80 pages before you're like, oh wow, this is a gem. So it's really like a quality check, or a filter that filters out people that have small attention spans.
Okay.
But if you can make it through that, and if you get through the book, you'll be able to, I think, just appreciate the understated things a lot more.
Okay.
So.
Well, I say all that just because, I lived in Japan for 3 years. I've gone on vacation all over Asia to, China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Bali, Taiwan. And the Asian cultures just surprised the crap out of me. And I think I can't recommend enough that you go. I think that you would find a different level of appreciation for, like you mentioned, how they have taken on such an Americanized way of life now, because it is still innately Japanese. There's really no way around that. There's no way for them to avoid what they are. And I think you'd really love it. I can't recommend it enough.
Well, I'll definitely take your recommendation to heart. And it's not that I'm going to dismiss checking it out.
Right.
But it's like, it would be a wu-wei kind of thing. Like I would want some orders over to Okinawa because,
the only downside to Okinawa is the unforgiving heat.
Yeah.
That's actually all of Asia, to be honest with you. They don't believe in air conditioning the way we do. And they're savages for that reason and that reason only. So
that's really funny.
But Josh, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you have a fantastic remainder of your really, really short deployment. I'm pretty jealous of you that you're going to be back in familiar territory before you know it. And is there anywhere, you got like a social media presence at all? Are you like an active grammer or anything like that?
No, not too often, but I can throw it out there if people care
if you
enough
want.
to.
Absolutely.
I might be more active on it. Let's see what we got here.
You're the guy that has to look up your own profile.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm the exact same way.
It's Josh T. Moser.
Okay.
No spaces.
Perfect.
Oh, and that's Moser.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like there's an H, but there's not because my family just said screw English.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. Well, again,
and also I
go
wanted to interrupt, and I had to say thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk to you and meet you. You're a super awesome guy, and
Absolutely.
I look forward to chatting more.
Yeah,
in the future.
we can do another one, and once you're back in the States, we can just do the phone in kind.
Also,
pretty easy stuff.
I hope you enjoy the remainder of your stay, and I hope your sleep quality gets better and better each night.
If it doesn't, that's why there's drugs. So
true, that is very true.
Sweet, man. All right, thanks.
Yeah, man.